Hello, everyone. My name is Krisha Vyas, and I'm a third-year political science and communications double major.
Hello, my name is Ellen Kim, and I'm a second year education and social transformation major.
Hello, my name is Christopher Espino, and I am a fourth year education and social transformation major with a minor in labor studies.
The three of us serve as undergraduate research assistants at the UCLA Pritzker Center for Strengthening Children and Families, and today we will be presenting our project, 5 Years Forward, Progress and Partnership at the Intersection of Child Welfare and Domestic Violence. The UCLA Pritzker Center acknowledges our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva people.
Domestic violence affects families across the country, and nearly 1 in 6 children in the United States have witnessed domestic violence involving a parent during childhood. When children are present in the home, domestic violence can also lead to child welfare involvement. In Los Angeles County, this has raised serious concerns, especially when survivor parents are accused of, quote, failure to protect their children during incidents of abuse. This framing can place responsibility on the survivor rather than on the person causing harm. Our project examines the progress that has been made and the gaps that remain in supporting parent survivors and their children.
This report represents the third phase of a longer research effort. Phase 1 began in 2021 with a landscape study that examined gaps in policy, practice, training, data collection, and cultural competency at the intersection of domestic violence and child welfare. Phase 2 took place between 2023 and 2024 through a pilot study in the Antelope Valley in partnership with DCFS Lancaster and Valley Oasis. That pilot focused on cross-system training, consultation, and collaboration between child welfare staff and domestic violence service providers. Phase 3, which is the focus of this presentation, is the 5 Years Forward study. It looks at the progress made since the first report and whether the findings from the Antelope Valley pilot apply more broadly across Los Angeles County.
The current study had two main parts. Part A was a survey of LA County DCFS administrative staff. The survey asked administrators about perceived improvements since 2019 in services and support for families involved in the child welfare system due to domestic violence, familiarity with specific relevant changes within DCFS, and current practices and priorities for future work. Part B focused on parent survivors outside the Antelope Valley. The UCLA Pritzker Center conducted 7 focus groups with 27 parent survivors across LA County. These focus groups helped assess whether the issues identified in the Antelope Valley were also present in other parts of the county. Together, this data allowed us to compare institutional perspectives with the lived experiences of parent survivors.
Survey findings showed that DCFS leaders perceived some progress, especially in identifying domestic violence. About half of administrators said identification had improved considerably or greatly. However, the findings also showed that progress was uneven. Fewer administrators reported such improvements in risk assessment, safety planning, and service linkages for families experiencing domestic violence. The weakest improvement was in partnerships with domestic violence service providers and support for teens and transition age youth experiencing domestic violence. In short, administrators recognized improvement, but they also identified a continued need for more training, better access to domestic violence experts, more consistent risk assessment and safety planning, and stronger service partnerships. Additionally, the need for attention to prevention programming and support for teens and transition age youth was evident.
Parent survivors from other areas of LA County described experiences that were remarkably consistent with the Antelope Valley pilot findings. Many parent survivors described institutional betrayal, where systems that were supposed to help instead deepened trauma, mistrust, or blame. Survivors often felt they were expected to navigate child welfare, courts, legal systems, and child welfare service plans on their own. Economic and housing barriers were also central. Leaving an abusive relationship often meant losing income, housing stability, benefits, or access to resources. For some parents, basic needs like beds, transportation, or safe housing became barriers to reunification with their children who were placed in foster care. Parent survivors identified experiencing anti-Black biases, ethnic immigrants, and socioeconomic biases within child welfare, domestic violence services, law enforcement, and courts. Biases and racism created barriers to immediate safety needs being met and to receiving help over time. Parent survivors also emphasized gaps in services for children, especially after reunification. They described the need for long-term, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive support for both children and parent survivors.
In addition to service gaps experienced by children and parent survivors, another finding that emerged was how professionals who work to support families experiencing the child welfare system and domestic violence, such as police, judges, social workers, and attorneys, may experience secondary traumatic stress due to repeated exposure to families' trauma. Parent survivors expressed compassion for professionals who may be experiencing secondary traumatic stress. Parent survivors also expressed that collaboration with professionals across systems led them to feel supported and facilitated more efficient progress through case plans. When professionals listened and helped families navigate complex systems, it helped build a space where barriers could be identified and overcome. The current study added evidence to findings from the Antelope Valley pilot about the urgent need of parent survivors and several strategies used to overcome systemic barriers parent survivors faced when trying to work through child welfare and foster care case plans.
Current survivors and DCFS administrators identified overlapping priorities for improving responses to domestic violence and child welfare cases across both qualitative and quantitative data. First, both emphasized that service coordination across systems was necessary to facilitate navigation of complicated child welfare, court, legal, and service system networks. Second was the need for cross-system partnerships to collectively meet the needs of parent survivors, their children, and professionals alike. Third, both groups emphasized the need for increased economic and housing resources for parent survivors to mitigate financial hardships that may be exacerbated or triggered by leaving violent relationships, regardless of survivors' socioeconomic status. The fourth finding was the need to fill service gaps for children to promote their stabilization, recovery, and healing. Aftercare services when parent survivors and children reunify, and team-based services needed to strengthen parent survivors working to repair relationships with their children while confronting the evolving needs of their children.
Continuing with the findings, the fifth priority raised by both parent survivors and DCFS administrators was to engage people who commit domestic violence to gain their perspective and also find opportunities for potential accountability and recovery. Sixth, both groups identified the importance of including people with lived experience and direct service staff in organizational and system change efforts from the beginning to integrate their unique experiences into planning and implementation. Lastly, there was a consensus about increasing upstream efforts to provide community-based, trauma and culturally informed prevention and early intervention to families to facilitate parent survivors and their children staying safely together in their communities.
We'd like to take this opportunity to express our heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to the UCLA Pritzker Center and our academic supervisors, Dr. Brenda Tully, Nancy Olivares, and Taylor Dudley. Second, we'd like to express our gratitude to the Blue Shield Foundation in funding this project and our other academic partners, such as Dr. Laura Liavano Karim and Dr. Ivy Zukaya. We would also like to thank our partners in this collaboration, parent survivors who participated in focus groups, numerous domestic violence service organizations and survivor groups, and DCFS leadership and administrators who completed the survey. We hope this work encourages future collaborations.